morning everyone. I'll be taking on Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya. So, he was actually one of the few philosophers amongst the contemporary Indian philosophers who has had academic background. So, he pursued philosophy as a profession. He was a philosophy professor and administrator. He was born in 1875 in the state of West Bengal in scholarly Sanskrit experts in that kind of a background. So mother and father, parents, all were quite experts in Sanskrit. So it is incidental to say that he has had great Indian wisdom at a very young age. So again, being an academic philosophy, just like Radhakrishnan, he had the privilege of having good stronghold of ideas both in West and in Indian philosophy as well. In particularly Western philosophy, he had great studies over Immanuel Kant, German classical thought. So when it comes to his philosophy, it's quite difficult, because if you want to designate this philosophy into some established philosophy system, you can't, because his philosophy is quite difficult in that sense. But to a certain extent, what B.K. says is that you can call this philosophy as transcendental idealism. Now we are tempted to equate it with the transcendental idealism of Immanuel Kant, but again it's very different. Even idealism in the Western sense and in the Indian sense is quite different. So idealism, as generally accepted in the West, is the idea that whatever we see, reality, is ultimately made up of ideas. But in the Indian sense, it is much more spiritual in nature, and spiritual means then comes the play of Brahman. So, but Krishna Chandra says that idealism, according to him, is the end of the process of realization. So, where this idealism starts is where realization ends. Now, Vigila did not mention what kind of realization. Is it actually moksha or is it some kind of realization? But that is what's written, and we could just go with this sentence. And now, when it comes to being transcendental, it's more like he is trying to say that the ultimate can't be described in simple philosophical evidence. That is, you can't use any common simple philosophical jargons or terms, or common accepted philosophical terms, to describe what he calls the absolute or the ultimate. And the next thing is that he relates everything to experience, and this experience is quite different. He talks about it in terms of objective and subjective, and ultimate reality, according to him, is what transcends this distinction. So,
first of all, what is the transcendental?
Going beyond something, going beyond.
We are going beyond empirical, materialistic. We have very good example of this, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. His yoga is called as transcendental idealism. So it's nothing but, according to him, even if one can do this, that means one can transcend towards this, that state by opening eyes, by choosing or using, by opting whatever the way the individual wanted. So that's how transcendental is something which is, when compared to the lower level, the individual, as Shri Aurobindo told, from the status of the being to become like that. Transcendental is something higher level to be considered.
So what Bhattacharya is trying to say that same as man mentioned, transcendental. Here we are going beyond the subjective and the objective distinction. So reality, according to him, is the ultimate presupposition of experience. So that is, it is neither subjective nor objective, and so to kind of round it off, this philosophy involves a lot of abstraction, even to the maximum limit of going beyond the subjective and the objective distinction. And knowledge can be understandable only through not purely being subjective or objective. So it's like neither subjective or objective. Now, he introduces this concept called theoretic consciousness, and he explains philosophy through this theoretic consciousness. So when it comes to theoretic consciousness, he first talks about this distinction or the nature of difference between science and philosophy. So science, according to him, has a relation to facts, whereas philosophy does not claim any facticity. So science has facts, philosophy is more symbolic in nature. It does not associate itself with any facts. Now, I'll just read out some words by Bhattacharya. So I'll just quote them. So there is this sentence called, I quote, "Theory at its minimum is the understanding of the speaker." So at this level, what Bhattacharya is trying to say is that it's something that you can understand it through something systematically communicated. Next is what is spoken must be in the first instance believed. So theoretic consciousness is the basic understanding that has to be believable, and Bhattacharya says that theoretic consciousness has a believed content and not a meant content. This believed and meant content distinction is quite interesting, because when you talk about believed content, it is something that is spoken through. It is something that is spoken that must be believable. So even if you take lie, for example, even though it is false, it should be believable because it is presented in a way that you should believe. Whereas meant content is more on the factual nature. So it is clear, you can understand it, and it's precise. And it is meant, as the name suggests, it has a particular information or an intention to convey. So Bhattacharya's talk takes the example of a square circle. So as we know, square circle is this kind of a forced combination between a square and a circle, where this has 4 angles and 4 equal sides. Whereas a circle is spherical in shape, or like a round shape. It has no angles and no sides. So fundamentally, it is quite incompatible to call this a square circle. So this has no believed content, and this definitely has no meant content, because it's quite illogical to doing this now. But as I said in the example of the lie earlier, so even though the lie can be false, it has that believed content. So at the basic level, theoretic consciousness has believed content, and it is spoken, systematically communicated, easy.
Is there any coherence between sharing those consciousness with this believing?
Yes, I think so.
Consciousness basically it's nothing but chit-chat, It's nothing but there is some kind of awareness within it. So try to find some distinction. In the class I am going to.
So Bhattacharya says that theoretic consciousness is not the exact as knowledge. Knowledge is the clear awareness of facts or possible states of affairs, whereas theoretic consciousness is just an understanding of an awareness, not to the complete extent of explicitly knowing it. So that is why it has a symbolic meaning, and it is devoid of facts. So this should be kept in mind when you are thinking about theoretic consciousness. Because after this, the next topic I'll be talking is about the 4 grades of theoretic consciousness. So, theoretic consciousness, the grades involve more like a stage or a higher ladder, you would say. 4 grades, and it is empirical consciousness, objective consciousness, subjective consciousness, and transcendental. So, he speaks more like of at a first stage you negate, you try to make a conflict with it, then you find a new thing, that is the next one, and even though it may seem a bit different from the earlier stage, the stages have some inner kind of a meaning, it has a relation. So starting with empirical consciousness. So in empirical consciousness, we have an object. So reference is made to the object. So the content of consciousness derives its meaning from this reference of the objective. Now, so for the objective to grasp the content of this consciousness, Bhattacharya says that the objective is seen as a fact. It's quite simple. Empirical consciousness, it has this reference to the object, and the object is seen as a fact, and the content is kind of the overarching thing, the meaning. Now, here there is no thinking happening. It's only reference to the object. So now for the next one. Next one is the objective consciousness. I will explain using the reference of empirical consciousness. So in empirical consciousness, we have a reference to the object, but in objective consciousness, you have reference to sense perception. And sense perception in turn reveals the object to the subject. So here we can see that the subject has come into play, whereas the subject is nowhere to be seen here. So this is empirical and this is objective. And as
give an example for that. What do you mean by subjective and what do you mean by objective? One simple example. Subjective means direct perception. Objective means with some support only we are going to substantiate that perception. So in that sense, how consciousness works with regard to the subjective and objective. Somewhat this thinker is difficult only when compared to just like Sri his philosophy is also somewhat difficult. Comparatively, this Radha Krishna and other Radha Krishna purely an idealistic philosopher who used to emphasize on Hindu dharma and Hindu that synthesis of these on the features of both the East and the West and all. Whereas he is purely concentrating on the the Indian context, that too with regard to the consciousness, which is also called as Chaitanya, Anchit or whatever the way we are going to interpret. And for that he has been used both subjective and the objective knowledge.
and moving on. So it is as a fact in everyday consciousness, and here the content is supposed to be self-subsistent. What does self-subsistent mean? Something that is subsisting or maintaining on its own. So here, one second. On its own. Yeah. So sense perception and self-subsistent. I think we can squeeze subjective consciousness here. So the third.
Bro, if you want, you can move the board. Use that button.
So,
Yeah. Just move the board.
like this.
Yeah. Click the pen. Click the pen. Pen.
Pen or thanks to Bhattacharya learning this word. And next is subjective or theoretical consciousness. So by the word spiritual, we are kind of led by the way of being purely subjective. Obviously, then this stage or consciousness has absolutely no reference to any of them, or we could say objective attitude, no reference to object. So it's purely within the subject, in an enjoying consciousness or a state. So, simple, no reference. It's only subjective. The contemplation is only in the subjective, it's purely subjective. So the content where here it is the fact, here it is the self-subsistent, here it becomes the content, here it's called reality. Now, from fact, self-subsistent to outright calling it reality can be a wild take. But I think that's what Bhattacharya wants us to transcend beyond the empirical complexities of this to be more complex. So next, the last stage, the transcendental consciousness. So here, I mean, at this point, we can easily tell there is no reference to object, there is no subject. It's basically transcending the subject and object. So the kind of contemplation would be transcendental in nature. So I think that's okay enough way to explain this transcendental consciousness.
Still something else.
Ma'am, can you add that? Even I'm a bit confused.
When taking class, I'm really happy. But he's more ideal, we can say, some dryness in his philosophy more when compared to all other contemporary Indian philosophy. At least we can, to some extent, we can understand Sri Aurobindo also. By making up, to take up, I think in the Life Divine, we have seen several steps now, how from the materialistic approach, the spiritualistic approach is possible like that. Whereas here it is purely based upon subject, object, and at the same time this consciousness levels, what he has been expressing is somewhat, they are very, very idealistic in its, his approach is somewhat different when compared to all other contemporary Indian philosophy. Somehow, anyhow, it is, while I am taking class, I give you in detail regard to this. But anyhow, commonly, if you consider consciousness, we know very well, it is some kind of awareness the individual has, whether it is of his own personal level, as you told, subject subjects means we are all subjects. And object means with some other thing we are going to have that experience and experience. So that's how that he wanted to synthesize his both, and ultimately he wanted to bring that transcendental consciousness through his own approach. So this is his philosophy in fact. So somehow you tried, but still if it has been supported with examples, it would have been more fun.
So I have this one more small topic. So through creative consciousness, he tries to explain the nature of philosophy, how it differs with science, even though I have told that there is a differentiation between science, which is training practicity, and whereas it's a bit more theoretical from philosophy, and it does not have any reference to science. So, using all this theoretic consciousness to reality, self-subsistenceness, and object aspect, he tries to use this example of, or at least, one more thing, the content here is truth. So we have reality here, and from reality it has included transcended to truth, and no distinction between object and subject. So, according to Bhattacharya, so philosophy is only concerned with the last 3 grades of this consciousness. So empirical consciousness only has a relation to facts. So that is more of the subject matter of science. Whereas philosophy has the subject matter of these 3 grades of consciousness. And after that, he introduces this thing called X is. A statement like this. So when you look at in the empirical consciousness view, XS is just a statement that has a subject, a predicate, or anything a predicate, and it gives out information, it conveys something. But imagine if it is not an empirical judgment, or you could say it's not a literal statement, it's something non-informative. What would happen? So if it's non-informative, then it must be just signifying or giving importance to something. So you could say it is trying to be a symbol, and with being trying to be a symbol, it becomes a philosophical statement. So, with using this excess, so using philosophical statement, then philosophy has more of a symbolic thinking rather than sticking to any facts. And I would like to quote Bhattacharya here. So according to him, truth is symbolically spoken, reality is literally spoken as symbolized, self-subsistence subsistent is literally spoken as myth. So as we can see, there is this value of symbolism, or it is a symbolic value everywhere, where self-subsistent is little, reality is somewhere in the middle, and truth is the ultimate. So in that sense, you could see an Advaita flavor to it, where he emphasizes truth as absolute, indescribable. They attempted to equate it with Brahman. And if this symbolic thought that I just quoted is put in a judgment form, then according to him, any of the 3 things can happen. So let's just take X's. So in the judgment X's, in the objective consciousness, so X is symbolic, whereas S is remaining objective. And in the next stage, the excess, so in the objective, excess is symbolic, but the form is still objective, so it inherits some of its capabilities of being objective, and in subjective is maybe symbolic, but X remains subjective or in enjoying consciousness, and in transcendental, the whole, even X, the whole can be symbolic. So, in this sense, the first case, so there is a lot of contemplation in all these consciousness, and I would like to finish it with what he calls are the three grades of philosophy. So he uses theory consciousness and its grades to explain philosophy in an abstract manner. So the first grade of philosophy is that philosophy of the object having the self-subsistent as its content. The second is that philosophy of the subject with the speaking subjectivity as its content. And last, philosophy of truth having the transcendental absolute as its content. So it is very abstract, and in Hindi actually or in Sanskrit, this philosophy can be regarded as transcendental Atmavad. I just referred a video regarding that, and so that's about it.